Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, April 30th, 2021.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Kevin Allen.
And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Well, gentlemen, we're on the precipice of the month of May, which will mean playoff hockey, which I think all of us are waiting for. And this 56-game grind has been, at times it's been something where I don't think we thought we were going to get to 56 games. And Kevin, as Russ and I talked about yesterday, when it comes to a team like the Vancouver Canucks having to make up games that are potentially meaningless while the playoffs are going on in the other three divisions, or maybe even the other four divisions, I don't know what the purpose of going and playing 56 games is, but that's what the NHL has determined. But I think let's talk about.
We'll let him comment on it if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I understand.
Uh-oh.
Well, anyhow, I'll comment on it. I think it's hard for them, and I think it's something they had to do. Go ahead, Kev.
Yeah, you froze up.
Okay. Yeah, I did. I mean, I understand why they need to do it from the fairness of it all, but it's really becoming almost like exhibition games as the Canucks and Flames slowly eliminate themselves, from consideration. So, those aren't going to be very entertaining games, but it's not like they're going to be people there that have to watch them. It'll just, be an extension. But, I think we're going to have some great playoff hockey because there's a lot of animosity built up between the teams, and now we're going to see them again in the postseason.
Yeah, and speaking of animosity, okay, let's start with the North Division, where right now the Maple Leafs look like they're going to win first place. They have a 9-point lead on Edmonton. Edmonton's got 2 games in hand, but Toronto has got 3 games against Montreal, 1 game against Vancouver, a game against Ottawa, and 1 at the end of the year against Winnipeg. So their schedule is fairly easy. They've started, I think, have take advantage of the fact that they have this big lead because they started to do what I term as load management yesterday. They sat their top 2 defensemen in Muzzin and Riley, Nick Foligno, and Jack Campbell, and played a skeleton crew against Vancouver and beat them 4-1. So I think the Leafs are going to do that. But the interesting part of that game, and we'll get to the rest of the division in a second, was the fact that Wayne Simmons dropped the gloves with Alex Edler, who had never fought before in his entire NHL career, apparently. This was in response to Edler taking out Zach Hyman a couple weeks ago and injuring his knee. He got suspended for 2 games, and then not that Simmons targeted him, but clearly he went behind the net. He gave him a cross check or 2. He said, "Let's go," and Edler dropped the gloves. And I think Edler knew that it was coming, and Simmons cleaned his clock, but it wasn't completely unfair because once he was down on the ice, Simmons stopped punching him. But the reaction from the Vancouver media after the game, Kevin, was like this was an assassination. Well, if Alex Edler didn't take out Zach Hyman's knee, there would have been no need for him to fight.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, there'd always been a code that you just didn't fight guys that didn't fight,
right.
Now that just seems like it like we don't even have the veil anymore of that, this isn't just about retaliation, because that's what it was. I mean, you got a guy like everybody knew that he was going to, as you said, clean his clock. Like it's like saying, you got to pay a price because you injured someone. Now, does any of us really believe that Edler purposely intended to hurt him? Because I don't. I just think it was one of those things in the heat of the moment. And did he do something he shouldn't have? Well, absolutely. Should he have probably gotten more than 2 games? Maybe. But like to have a fight where you're going to clobber somebody,
right.
It just is ridiculous, really, and it's not really what we should be about. And I know old school. I'm mostly an old school person, but I don't know. Just the idea that you gotta make a guy pay so he won't do it again. I don't think Edler would do it again. I don't think he intended to do it in the first place.
Yeah, I watched it, and there's no question Simmons forced him in the sense that he pushed him 2 or 3 times and really wouldn't let him skate away. And that's the part I think Kevin's getting at, and that's what I didn't like. If he wanted to skate away or turtle like a Samuelson, fine. Like an old Samuelson used to do, fine. But he didn't have an opportunity to do that. So at that point, he had to fight, and that is a forced fight. And, yeah, I get it that Simmons is doing a job, but he didn't have to do that job. That job was unnecessary.
Yeah, and somebody made the point. Well, Zach Hyman's not a superstar. So there was no. I mean, well, that's not the okay. That
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. But Zach Hyman is extremely important to the Maple Leafs playoff chances, and it was only by happenstance because apparently that was the knee that he had an ACL tear a couple years ago. He was wearing a brace on the knee, and if he wasn't wearing a brace on the knee, the extent of that injury could have been a lot more severe. And if he would have been out for the season, that would have taken a real big chunk out of the Maple Leafs playoff chances. So, yeah, I mean, the circumstances are not the best, but I think the hue and cry and the that went on about that is sort of much ado about nothing. It's like,
I think there is something in the sense that, like Kevin said, he never had a fight. There's a reason he's never had a fight.
He's not a fighter.
Yeah, we don't. I mean, the human cry should be about that. We really don't need this in the game anymore. I'm not offended if 2 guys drop their gloves and they want to fight.
Sure,
that's totally fine with me. But the retaliation, the fact that Simmons had to go and protect the honor of the team and make sure that guy knew that he shouldn't do that. Well, I don't think you really need to do that. This game's a rather intelligent game now, and everybody understands, the ramifications of it. And, especially when it's a guy that never had fought before. Yeah. And like I said, nobody thought in 100 million years when that fight started, well, Edler's a big guy. He'll be able to protect him.
Right.
Yeah.
No, the optics look bad.
It did. I mean, you're hammering on a guy that really has no idea, how to fight or what he's involved in, or just because you see fights doesn't mean you know how to do it. So, I get it.
He caught him with 3 or 4 good shots, and then he turtled, and then Simmons laid off because he knew then it would get too much. But anyway, enough about that. Looking at the division right now, so the Leafs, it appears, are going to win the North Division, barring a complete collapse in the last 6 games and Edmonton going nuts. And it looks as if the first round match is going to be Edmonton versus Winnipeg, which, Kevin, I don't know if that's good news for the Winnipeg Jets because the Edmonton Oilers have won the last 6 games against the Jets. I don't know if regular season means anything, but that's not good news. Yeah, no, I mean it isn't. It is hockey, so they certainly could beat Edmonton, and that's not a bad matchup for Edmonton, just because they've had so much success against them. But I just think we're going to see results that we're not counting on, just because they played each other so much. They've lost all those games, but they're sitting around now trying to think, okay, how did we lose and what can we do to counteract that to make it to even the playing field a little bit? And they'll figure something out. There'll be something they'll do that'll help, and it'll be a different kind of series than the games they played before. And Russ, I mean, the last couple games, Winnipeg has been without Ehlers, and Ehlers has been extremely important to them. So, I mean, I'm not trying to prognosticate or handicap this matchup, but I'm just saying that losing 6 in a row during the regular season is not an optimum situation for having confidence going into the playoffs against.
No, but you know what? I think, for lack of a better term, there's a lot of players that are just over this regular season. If it ended tomorrow, they would cheer. They would. And just to get to the playoffs, because it's been redundant. It hasn't been the kind of travel that they like. And so I think a lot of them are kind of not intentionally, but just sort of going through the motions, especially these teams that, are just fighting for position and not their playoff lives.
Now,
the loss of Ehlers is a bigger deal than
it's a big deal.
Having lost 6 in a row like that. He's an important player on that team. But the one advantage that they have, we talk about it all the time, but sometimes we just forget it. Goaltending is always crucial, and they've got the better goalie. In Winnipeg.
Yeah, I mean, Hellebuck's Vezina Trophy winner, and Mike Smith, and I don't know whether he played in the game last night, but Mike Smith left the ice a couple days ago during a practice and tweaked something, and he's been really good for them, better than I ever thought a 39-year-old Mike Smith would be. But if he's laboring going into the playoffs and they have to go to Mikko Koskinen, then that evens up the score for Winnipeg. Now,
listen, but again, I am not going to say I don't know what the physical condition of Alex Stalock is, but I think if Smith were out, I think they might consider Stalock over Koskinen because they know what Koskinen can't do already. And Stalock had a good run last year. He did.
Well, I mean, it'd be nice if they get him a game, Russ. I don't think he's played.
I don't know why they're not. That's the part that I don't understand.
I think it was strictly insurance. That's why I don't think they thought.
I mean, sometimes teams do that and really shoot themselves in the foot because sometimes, you know what? Just because you have that guy, Koskinen, doesn't mean he's good. It just means he's one less problem to worry about for you because you know what he does or doesn't do. But sometimes you gotta, give the other guy a chance.
Now I'm not Eck. I'm not Mr. Mathematics when it comes to the team. These teams are still alive for a playoff spot. I'm the one who is the one quick to say it's over. But right now, Calgary wins last night. Montreal they lost their last game to the Leafs. Montreal has had a horrific schedule in terms of the number of games because they had a couple weeks off because of COVID. The Flames are 4 points behind the Canadiens. The Canadiens have a game in hand, so you could say they're 6 points ahead. That's a sizable lead this late in the season, Kevin, but Montreal's trend seems to be going down, and they have 3 games next week against Toronto. Toronto doesn't seem to be letting up off the gas pedal. Do you think this is still a race? First question.
Well, I mean, we probably should say it is because of those 3 games against a team that's obviously better than them. But I don't see that Toronto is going to be overly excited about playing those games.
No.
So that sort of reduces, the dominance that you would expect, from Toronto. But, it's technically still a race. But how many games are left?
Calgary has 7 games left. Montreal has 8 games left.
Yeah, I mean, 8 games. If they go 500, and how many points do they have?
Montreal has 51. Calgary has 47.
So if they get 8 points, they'll be at 59. So then Calgary's got to get 12 points out of their last 7 games.
Yeah,
they got to go. If Montreal goes 500, they can only lose 1 game. I don't see that happening.
Now I'm just looking quickly at the schedules here, and here's the thing that is potentially, it's not devastating, but it's going to be a problem for the NHL if this happens. Winnipeg, or sorry, bless you. The Calgary right now, they play Edmonton, Winnipeg, Ottawa, and Vancouver. 4 games over the next 2 weeks. And then they have the 3 makeup games against Vancouver. If they're still mathematically in the playoff race, Kevin, the North Division has to wait a week until those 3 games are done to start their playoffs. That means that the East, the Central, and the West are going to be a week ahead, and that probably means the North Division in some of their matchups are going to have to play back-to-back games or 4 games in 6 nights or whatever. That's going to be a big disadvantage for the North Division going down the line because it'll be exhausting.
Yeah, although we've had other playoff series when teams have had to wait a lengthy time because they've swept and the other one went 7, and we've had, so we have seen that. But I don't think it's going to happen, to be honest. I think this will sort itself out, unless the only way I can see that happen is if Montreal really goes south.
Yeah.
Right? We don't. But if they just play 500, I think they're fine.
Yeah, and I think they will. I think they'll sort that out too. I have some breaking news.
Go ahead.
So we know that Avant-Garde Omsk won the Stanley Cup, the Gagarin Cup. Thank you,
Yuri Gagarin,
however you pronounce it. But he won that in the KHL, and they won that. And today, Ilya Kovalchuk terminated his contract. There's a mutual termination. So now it does make me wonder, is he coming back to another team to play a couple of games in the regular season and then the playoffs? And while I'm getting sick of this, it seems like NHL teams aren't. And so now we have to believe he's going to try and do something like that.
I don't think he can because it's after the trade deadline.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He doesn't, he's a UFA. He doesn't have a contract, so he can't sign and then play in the playoffs. He could sign and finish out the regular season, but he couldn't. I don't think he can play in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Okay. I didn't know if you were coming from the KHL, if that were the case.
It's different. It's different if you were, what's his name from Nashville, who had an existing contract.
Right.
Not playing for, you know what I'm talking about. Radulov, yes. It's different if you're Radulov and you had an existing contract or you were an RFA. But if you're a UFA, it's a new contract and you can't sign a new contract and play in the playoffs. So it
just makes you wonder. He had a 2-year deal and then now he's terminated it after winning it all. It does make you wonder what that next step is. Maybe
he comes back next year. Maybe there's a team maybe he comes to Seattle. He likes coffee. Who knows? But just to finish off the North, so Montreal, they have Winnipeg tonight. They have 2 games against Ottawa, which are not easy because Ottawa always plays them tough. They have 3 games against Toronto, and they finish off with 2 games against Edmonton. So, like you said, Kevin, I don't think Toronto may sit a guy like Matthews or Marner in one of those games. So
although that's a tough schedule. But in that division, what would be an easy schedule? Like who could they get that? So it's been like this all season for them. So you would think they could put together 500, and I do believe that will be enough.
And I don't think Toronto is going to do Montreal any favors because they potentially could face Montreal in the first round. And even though Montreal has had a up and down year, they'll play Toronto tough, and it would be a tough series. But anyway,
what's the status of Carey Price? Do we know?
He's still recovering from the concussion, and that to me, they may be playing it very careful, Russ, because they know that their only chance is to have a completely healthy Carey Price. I would rest him as long as possible before trying to get him back.
Yeah, actually, he said yes a couple of days ago. He's undergoing more testing, and things are going in the right direction.
Yeah. So
you're right. They're being just abundantly careful.
So moving to the East, Washington and Pittsburgh are tied for first place with 69 points. They both have playoff spots clinched.
Although Pittsburgh was the first to clinch, I heard, right?
Yes, because their game finished.
Let's talk about that for a minute, because again, on this show, and not even bringing up X.
Here we go.
No, not even doing that. I'm going to leave X name out of it. But I just want to say on this show, pre-Hextall, we all thought Pittsburgh might be in a little trouble. I think Kevin included, because they just came out of the gate so lousy. And it's been a big turnaround for them this year. And I don't think it's all Ron Hextall and Burke. I don't. I do think there was a little spark, though, when the Flyers didn't when they basically waived Friedman and they picked him up, the Penguins picked him up, and they got a goal out of him, and he won a game for him. And Friedman really hasn't played. But I do think that helped spark them a little bit, and that was something Hextall did. But Kev, something did spark this team, because they were flat for weeks.
Well, Malkin wasn't playing well. That was really their biggest problem early on. I think 2 people are responsible, and they're not Hextall and Burke. I think it's Crosby and Mike Sullivan. Crosby has been consistent all season long. I follow that team pretty closely, and I watch a lot of their games, and I check their summaries. And they've Crosby, he's just like money in the bank. He makes a deposit every game. he gets something. He's created a goal. He's been part of it. He's had a really, really strong season. There's no sign that he's slowing down. He's as strong as he was. And Sullivan has done a great job of taking all of those pieces and placing them in on lines and being successful. Like, you look at their scoring summary now, there's a bunch of guys that you know very little about who have become important secondary scorers for the Penguins. It's not all Gunsel and Rust doing the scoring. There's just a lot of characters on that team now that produce for it, and the defense is played well enough. The goaltending has been adequate as well. And,
I think Jerry's recovered. He definitely started out.
Yeah, he started out poorly.
Well, that's what I was going to bring up. I just looked up this because remember his save percentage in the first month of the season was in the mid 800s. It was terrible.
Yeah, I didn't bail on him though because I knew I had seen enough Jerry in the past that I was willing to ride it out.
But he's 22-9-3. Save percentage is .910, which is about average. 2.75 goals against, but 22 wins.
Yeah, well, that team, I still think they only have 3 home losses.
4. No.
4 now. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing what they've done at home, and that's going to be a big thing in the playoffs now because.
And the guy that we started to say at the beginning of the year was was coming to the end of it is Chris Letang, and Chris Letang has got 40 points this year.
Yeah, see, I didn't bail on him. I know Eck was bailing on him, and I did not bail on Letang because remember, if you remember, I said, look, he's not scoring points like he used to, but he still was skating well and still was playing well.
Yeah.
And so I'm not shocked that Letang has 40 points. I mean, this guy is a Hall of Fame defenseman. Considering the injuries he's overcome, too, the cups he's won, he's actually better than Duncan Keith. He is.
I mean, there's an argument to be made there. They both won. They both won 3 Stanley Cups. I think both of them are Hall of Famers. It's just a question. Yeah. I think Keith might get the edge because Keith has been more durable. Letang has gone through a series of injuries. Now you could say that, well, Letang is still great and he's gone through that series of injuries. Right. But Keith has been somebody, and he's been a minutes eater for most of his career. Where
but the last few years have been really marginal. He's got 15 points. 15.
I think he's coming to the end of it. I mean, I think I don't know if he'll finish out the contract, but hopefully.
Hold on. So there's 625 points for Duncan Keith, and there is 577 for Chris Letang. Now Letang's played 858 games. And Keith has played 1,188 games.
Okay, so Letang is going to have a better point per game percentage.
This is the old Mario Gretzky thing where Mario was always the points per game guy, and Letang clearly is that guy. And let's just see, average time on the ice for his career for Chris Letang, 24 minutes and 1 second. For Duncan Keith, 24:58. Those are two grinders, man.
Yeah, Kevin, what we were talking about is there was a lot of chatter at the beginning of the year that Chris Letang was pretty much done. And how can they get out of his contract and things of that nature. And you look at the stats right now, and he's got 40 points. He's one of the top scoring defensemen in the NHL, and it's just it's Chris Letang. He just keeps coming back.
And I came up with the argument, Kev. I actually think Chris Letang's better than Duncan Keith. I do, and I think it's close. Of course, it's close, but I do think he's better, and I think he's overcome more, and he's still better at this stage of his career, where Keith is really marginal at this point.
Well, I think Duncan Keith's had a better year too, to be honest. But I agree with you that Letang is better at this stage of his career. He hasn't lost as much as Duncan Keith has, and to be sure.
And both are Hall of Famers. I don't think anybody's going to argue that.
No, that's right. Yeah, Letang has been played a big role. The only thing about him is he's become. And this has been going on for several years now. He's a little fragile in terms of his ability to stay healthy.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting one too, just for the guys in the chat room saying that Keith is better in his own zone. Keith has more giveaways in his career than Chris Letang.
But Russ, early in his career, he was a Jake Gardner like giveaway machine. It was only
fair, but it's still your career.
Yeah. It was only after a few years when he sort of calmed down his game in his own zone did Keith become the.
No, I know, but I can't take that away and say, well, he eliminated that. He still did that. Yeah. But I just want to point out that yes, Keith was better for those peak years in his own zone, but not for his whole career.
And they were both, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. They both have been so important to their teams, like, to compare the two.
Did you hear the time on the ice for the career, Kev?
No, what is it? I'm curious.
It's 24:01 for Letang, and it's 24:58 for Keith, which is just unbelievable.
Well, the last Blackhawk Cup victory when he was playing 30. They were playing with 3 defensemen and they were playing 30 minutes a night. It was Yarmulson, Seabrook, and Keefe, and three guys you could barely, Chemo Tiemann played like 8 minutes a night. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, I remember talking to Sidney Crosby. This was several years ago about fancy stats, advanced stats, and about Corsi. And he was talking about it. And I said, well, what's your take on it all? He goes, well, here's my take. He says, how many times in my career have I been on the ice? Chris Letang takes the puck from behind the net, skates all the way up into the zone. We're all skating with him. He goes in, he goes around the net, comes back, shoots a puck on the net. No one else is on the ice has touched the puck. We all skate back to the bench, and I'm a positive Corsi because I was on the ice with him.
That's a good point.
and both of us just started laughing just because it's it's just so true. So.
Now the interesting thing, and the Flyers were mathematically eliminated yesterday.
Yeah, I have a few things about that.
So Eck can't hold on with his fingernails for those playoff opportunities. But the interesting thing here, Kev, is there's no point debating on what the matchups are going to be because the top 4 in the East are within 5 points of each other. So any combination, but I don't say this with any particular glee for Russ, but Russ has been talking about the fact that the Rangers are out of it. And last night, I think, was one of the nails in the coffin as the Islanders shut them out 4-0. And this is nothing against the Rangers because I think they've really had a great year. What's killed them is the long injury to Trouba and the long absence of Panarin. And if either one of those didn't happen, they might be tied with Boston right now.
Yeah, and don't we all agree that they there's so much similarity between the danger factor of the 4 teams that are going to make the playoffs. But I think the Rangers are right in there as well. I think you could have plugged them in for any of the 4, and we'd have the same dangerous type playoffs in terms of everyone being capable of beating everyone else.
I'll talk about the Ranger Islander first because I've watched a bajillion of those games in my life. Attended as a fan, attended as media in New York, out of New York watching. And here's the thing. So I looked at it, and the reason I had told Eck there was no way the Rangers could sweep this series was because I knew how Trotz would play this. I knew he would play physical. I knew he would play his veteran goalie, which he did. He played Varlamov, who got a 6 shutout, leading the league. I also knew they would come out like gangbusters, and they had a 2-0 lead after the first period. Trotz knew, listen, the Rangers are still a young team. They don't have as much pushback, and he knew he could get his team rolling if they played the right way early in that, got that going. And by the time Barzal scored that empty netter, the Rangers were really defeated. Like even Zibanejad had this really defeated look. After the game, David Quinn is like, look, this is good experience for us, but we have to, the players have to be able to win these kinds of games. It's almost like Quinn put it on the players like, hey, this team is really young and so they don't know how to win. But it's like, hey, you're a coach. You're supposed to help them do that. And he seemed to disassociate himself from that quote yesterday, and it really angered the fan base. And I get it because the last thing the Ranger fans want to see is getting your season dashed by the Islanders. I get it. I've been there. I've been there in Stanley Cup playoffs. I know what that's like. But I'm just saying, I knew the Islanders were not going to fold in this situation, and I knew they would rely on their veterans. The other thing, and Kev, you could comment on this too, with Shesterkin, hey, he's a terrific goalie, but he hasn't even played like 70 NHL games yet. And I had mentioned a week ago, this compacted schedule with him playing a lot of games down the stretch was going to take a toll on him, and it has.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the experience factor for a goalie, just learning the grind of how to pace yourself and how to ready yourself for the long season. And like it took Henrik Lundqvist a while to kind of sort that all out. Like, it just at one point, I think for him, the light bulb went on and he learned, what he needed to do in order to play. And then there was, remember late in his career, he kind of fought the idea of playing fewer games. And, that's all involved in the psyche of being a goalie and trying to figure it all out. And Shesterkin is just not even 2 steps into this process yet. He's just starting to look down the path. He hasn't been on the path long enough. So, not that he bears any responsibility for them being involved, but because I think it was the factors that Mike spoke to. But they're a really good team. I'm behind the idea that as well that Adam Fox deserves to have Norris consideration. I agree. A lot of their games, he's certainly in the mix for that. I really like this team moving forward. Boy, they got a lot going on.
Fox won the Steve McDonald Award, which was a big deal on the team. So that's something. Mike, as far as the Flyers go with their elimination, right? So a couple things happened yesterday that really ticked them off. Apparently, the Eagles traded up a couple of minutes before the Flyers were eliminated. And because there is such an inferiority complex in the city with any team versus the Eagles, that was a factor. So the Eagles still had the spotlight, and then the Flyers got eliminated, right? So that annoyed fans. And apparently Vigneault annoyed the fans because he talked about how the penalty kill is young and he had to work in players that didn't have a lot of penalty kill experience. Now, I don't think that's a shot at the young players. I think that's a shot at Chuck Fletcher when they let Tyler Pitlick go, because Tyler Pitlick did not sign for a lot of money. Tyler Pitlick, I think, signed with Arizona for like $1.5 million. Yeah.
Let me
a very valuable player for them.
Let me raise this question though. Like, let's start talking about blame here. And I know Carter Hart is going to bear some responsibility just because he just had such a poor season. But he's a young player. Like, I think it's I don't excusable is the wrong word, but maybe a little expected that a goalie that young wasn't going to be a perfect climb to the top. But I'm not sure people are passing enough blame on this to Fletcher.
I agree, they're not, and that's why I am.
Yeah, Fletcher really has not made the moves, especially early in the season where it was pretty clear that the defense wasn't good enough.
Right. So here's my thing with Fletcher, Kev. Like, we talked about what didn't happen over the summer with Niskanen. That's fine. Right. But there was a point like 6 weeks ago when the Flyers were still in the playoff contention, but the defense was failing to the point where I even said on the show, hey, they've got to at least get a physical defenseman that can clear the crease and help Carter Hart out. So maybe this could help because they're not getting a top 4. We knew that. And he didn't do it, Kev. He kind of just sat back. He made phone calls. He said he was making phone calls. But my answer to that is, and you would probably agree, this is your job. And if you have to overpay to get that, to fix your problem, you're better off fixing the problem than just telling everybody you couldn't do it, but we're trying.
Yeah. Well, and if he had done it early enough, they could have made the playoffs. I mean, it was the same team that we saw in like the season before with a couple of exceptions that he should have dealt with.
And if you didn't want to pay the price for David Savard, the big price that Tampa Bay, then look at what Nashville, and I'm not saying Erica Branson is a top 4 defenseman because he's a bottom pairing guy, but look at I think it was a 5th round pick for Erica Branson.
Right. It definitely could have helped. Is it ideal? No, but he would have blocked shots. And so, yes, I think anything would have helped him, but it wasn't going to help him at the deadline because at that point it was too far gone already. That was one where he had to be more like a Rutherford or something and react quickly and just get something done. There were some moves made. It wasn't like all GMs couldn't do anything.
One more note on the East, then we'll get the other 2 divisions before we end the show. After a horrendous year in Buffalo, minus 21, 2 goals in 37 games. In 10 games of the Boston Bruins, 5 goals, 3 assists, 8 points, plus 9 for Taylor Hall.
That's good for my fantasy team.
That in and of itself is not going to cleanse his reputation. If he scores in the playoffs, I think it will. But this has gone a little bit, Kevin, towards, I think, burgeoning his reputation and saying that the stench of Buffalo and what happened in that year under Ralph Kruger was not all Taylor Hall's fault.
Well, yeah, I never thought it was, but I would agree with that. I mean, we had not seen the MVP Taylor Hall since his MVP season,
right?
And I think everyone wondered what it would look like when he played with a good team, because he hadn't played with a good team. Even in Arizona, certainly, he wasn't. Playing with a good team. So I think he's done what he needed to do, and I agree with you. He needs to have a good playoff for sure.
I think he's fitting in there, and they're going to try and slide him in to some sort of contract, and that may be a really good fit for everybody, and it really could help bring Hall's career back to where it was.
Now we can go through the West really quickly because there's really no race there other than Colorado and Minnesota battling for home ice advantage, which honestly, in this playoff, I don't know. I know that there'll be some fans in some of the U.S. markets, but like in the North Division, home ice is almost meaningless. It's just simply the fact that whether you're staying at home or you're living in a hotel, but it's virtually meaningless. But in the West, Vegas is leading by 6 points over Colorado and Minnesota. St. Louis is in 4th place. They have a 5-point lead on the Coyotes. So right now it looks like, Kevin, Vegas versus St. Louis, which would be a very interesting matchup, especially Alex Pietrangelo playing against his former team, and the Avs and the Wild, which I think will be a tough matchup for Colorado. What do you think of those two matchups?
Well, I think we probably have not given enough attention to Vegas this season.
I agree.
I think everyone mostly has talked about Colorado. I mean, we were aware, I think, that Vegas was there doing it consistently well all season long, but it's only been in the last 2 or 3 weeks that I think all of us have looked and said, if you compare those two teams, there's a lot of similarities, except that Vegas has better goaltending. And even when Grubauer comes back, Vegas still has better goaltending. That big win the other night and the showdown. Now, obviously, Grubauer wasn't there, but it just kind of shows that this Vegas team is very good, and they've got.
Well, they are. We talked about that game, and Vegas was impressive during that game, Kev. And I didn't even blame it on Dubnyk. There were some other things that happened. Some dumb play. I'm surprised Mike wasn't on top of this by Nazem Kadri, but he. This year his faceoff percentage has dipped. I think he has gone back to having some bad penalties at bad times where I don't think he could do that in the playoffs for them. And he hasn't produced the way they need him to produce in the regular season. They need a better Kadri in the playoffs for sure to be successful, and that's something that showed in that one.
Yeah, we know we can always depend on Nazem Kadri in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Well, the loss of Brandon Saad, I think, is also significant. Yes. He's scored 15 goals this season, and
he had a really good year. He had a nice bounce. I mean, he's done better than I thought he would have. That's for sure. He's had a nice run there. So you're right, that was a big deal. But I also mentioned that the big guys were playing really well. Stone was playing well. Pacioretty was playing really well. And when you have to face these guys in the playoffs, they are going to grind you down. They're a big physical team, and they are hard to keep these guys out of the crease. And they do have physical forwards that play defense too. So they are going to be a factor. And Fleury is rounding into playoff condition now too, as far as how he's playing. He's looking good.
The only thing I would say from the Colorado perspective is there were times in that game when Colorado just owned the puck.
Yeah.
And you saw that. And I think that, they're capable of doing that. But they're going to have to really turn it up a notch because right now, if I was picking today, I would pick Vegas to beat Colorado in a 7-game series.
Yeah, and I can't argue with that. I do agree with you. I think they need to light a fire under them. I will say Dean Evison, though, said something yesterday about Eriksson Ek and how he's been a beast lately. And that's the Eriksson Ek that I saw before he got to the NHL. And it just took a while because the way he played his game, he wasn't physically strong enough. There was probably he had to learn how to be more aggressive offensively. But the last season and a half, he has really figured that out and become a terrific player and an important player for them. So between that and Kaprizov and good enough goaltending, they are a dangerous team. There's no question. And, when you got guys like Suter, I do think they could give everybody trouble.
It's not gonna be a walk for Colorado in the first round. And Vegas right now, they're peaking at the right time. They've won 10 games in a row, and they've got a plus 60 goal differential.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's nuts. Okay, moving on to the Central. Carolina, Florida, and Tampa all won yesterday. They're all within 3 points of each other, but I think Carolina has the advantage, Kevin. They have 50 games. They have 6 games left, and they're up by they have 2 games in hand on Florida. They're even with Tampa, but they're 3 points up on Tampa. So, again, Carolina, if they go 500, they probably win the division, and I'm sure that's what they want because they want Florida and Tampa to beat the crap out of each other.
Well, and no one will say this publicly, but you want to play Nashville too,
right. or Dallas,
But Dallas, I think, can make it.
Yeah, they could, but they haven't really performed.
No.
Taking advantage of the fact they've had those games in hand, and they really haven't made a move. They haven't made a move.
Well, they might. What if Tyler Seguin comes back for those last 3 games? What would you say then?
Well, I think he is going to come back, but I still they have a shot. I'm not diminishing that, but they just haven't. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting for them to make a move.
Right.
And
I know. You know what? I will say their goaltending has been good though. Khudobin has been better than I thought he would be, and Ottinger has become everything I thought he would be. So that's a hell of a tandem that they have there. Even if Khudobin's the number one,
it hasn't been enough. They're a really good defensive team too.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
but they just haven't been able to close the gap.
Now Dallas and Nashville play on Saturday. That's the last head-to-head matchup against.
That's a biggie.
Yeah. After that, Dallas has 5 games remaining: Florida, Tampa, and 2 against Chicago. That's not easy.
No.
I'm just checking Nashville's now to see what their schedule is. And sorry about this. Just trying to do this on the fly. Nashville Predators. Here we go. Of course, my phone locks up. So, yeah. Well, I'll try.
Time for a new phone, Mike.
Thank you, Russ. I'll contact.
By the way, how much are phones? I was watching a commercial, and I never pay any attention to these phones. And the commercial says they'll give you $1,000 off. If they'll give you $1,000 off, how much are?
Well, this phone. This is a 2-year-old phone, and when I paid for it, it was $1,000. So you had to break it up in a 24-month installment.
Yeah, my phone was a bargain, Kev. I think it was on sale for about $600. This iPhone 12 mini that I have, and I think that was a bargain at $600.
So I thought it was about 600 too, 6 or 7. Yeah.
After the head-to-head matchup against Dallas, Nashville plays 4 more games: 2 against Columbus, 2 against Carolina. So I would say theirs is a little easier than Dallas's, but Dallas has got the game in hand. So it could go down to the last night.
So what do we think? I'm going to ask Kevin this. Playoff start. Who's the goaltender for Carolina?
It'll be Mrazek.
They will be, right?
Okay. Yeah, for sure. But, they've got options. But the only thing is he's a little banged up.
Yeah.
But I think my impression is that Brendan Moore just favors him. I think the guys like playing for him.
Right.
Well, I'm actually writing a story about that because I just talked to Don Waddell this morning about how they feel about it. But we'll wait and see how it breaks out.
Yep.
Now, Kev, I wanted to get your input and opinion on the big news of the week, which was the new television contract with the NHL with Turner and TNT and TBS, a 7-year deal, which is going to net the NHL about I think it said $225 million per year. So that contract, along with the ESPN contract, basically increases the U.S. deal to $650 million, I think it was, and that's 3 times what they were making from NBC. But the concern that Russ and I had was the lack of a major network presence with the Stanley Cup final. I mean, we think it's going to be on ABC for ESPN, but there's no major network aspect with Turner. It's going to be on TNT, and so is the Winter Classic is going to be on TNT.
Yeah. Well, those are all issues to consider, but this is a deal that you couldn't refuse. It's just much more money than they were getting before. And clearly NBC didn't step up, because I think up until the last weekend, there were at least, I'm sure of this, there were NBC folks that thought the NBC was still in it.
I think they were offended, Kev. I think when they lost out to ESPN, they didn't want to give the kind of money that the NHL was searching for, because they wanted to be the number one. I don't think they ever wanted to be the number 2 to ESPN, not seriously enough anyhow.
Well, and I think the death knell to me was when they announced that the NBC Sports Network wasn't going to exist anymore.
Right.
So where were we going?
Right.
That's the only thing I would say too is, and we've all forgotten this, but when we were on ESPN last time, the chief complaint was that we were second and third fiddle,
right,
all the time. And I don't care about SportsCenter. People talk about SportsCenter. I could care less about that.
No, I don't care about it either.
But it was what it was is you never knew when NHL Tonight was going to be on, or if it was going to be on, and if it was going to be on, what time was it going to be on?
Sure.
Right.
There was so much inconsistency, you couldn't count on it. And it was just sort of hard to feel like they cared about hockey. So we end up with NBC. And, they made us an important part of their new sports network.
They did.
And we had consistency there all the time. And, you can nitpick with some of the things that NBC did. But basically, they took care of the sport for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And, they were important. They were important to NBC. They got the Sunday afternoon spots and Saturday afternoon spots, and they got consistent. All the playoff games were on. They moved mountains to make sure of all that. Eddie Olczyk was a great analyst, a lead analyst. Mike Emmerich was the best. Mm-hmm. So they did a lot of good things, and now we have a lot of unknown. So they're going to get a lot.
There's 3 things, Kev, that keep popping up for me, and people message me. The first one is, like, even a great hockey fan messaged me, like, I think I'm going to have trouble. I'm a cord cutter. I think I'm going to have trouble finding certain games, and I think he's right.
Yeah.
Also, I worry about how TBS will cover the Winter Classic. It is not easy to do. Yeah. Basically, NBC created how to cover that. And you could say, well, we're going to hire some of their people, and that's fine. But there's always loyalty from within. So there could be some hiccups in actually the coverage of the outdoor coverage of that game, how they film it. That's a little bit of a worry. And the other thing that sort of made me laugh, Kev, some fans were like, well, oh, look, we're going to get the Road to the Winter Classic back because HBO Max is in it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not so worried about the coverage, the show that leads into the game.
Who cares?
I want the game to be good. I don't care about the other.
Well, I mean, I like a good pregame show, and I think they'll do a good job on that because they do a good job with basketball. So,
but this is my concern, Kevin, and more on the ESPN side than on Turner, because Turner. I mean, I'm a little concerned about the 3 years that the Stanley Cup final will be on TBS or TNT and people being able to watch it. But with ESPN, they're not going to be second fiddle. They're going to be fourth fiddle because ESPN, when the NHL was on ESPN, I think they were just starting out the MLB contract. I think they were just getting into the NFL. They didn't have the NBA at that time. And they were at that point they were moving NHL games to ESPN2, which had I think like 65% of the cable markets, whereas ESPN had 95%.
Right.
I'm hoping that the NHL got some sort of guarantee that the games will be on ESPN proper and not ESPN2 or something else, because then they're not going to get the eyeballs. That contract is heavily on ESPN Plus, so they're hoping for the streaming aspect, but they're going to be second fiddle to the NBA because the NBA is on NBC, ABC, and on ESPN at the same time. And I seriously doubt if the NBA final is at the same, the same part of June as the Stanley Cup final, that ABC is going to go NBA final, Stanley Cup, NBA final, alternating every day. The games are going to be on ESPN while the NBA final is going to be on ABC, and that is being made second fiddle.
Yeah, the only thing I would say too is though that we got to factor in that ESPN is fighting its own battle for relevancy.
Right.
And because of that, I think they'll be a lot more careful with all of their sports now because, they've got their own issues. And I think they're they were an 800-pound gorilla last time they were there. Right now, they're a wounded gorilla.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people under 30 don't watch. The issue about not finding games, I think that's mostly an older people's thing.
No, the cord cutters are worried because.
Well, I've talked to my adult children. I find it just so amusing that I can't find things, and they walk in and say, they give me my flicker and they say, say what you're looking for into your voice. Right. It'll show right up, and I'll be damned. That's exactly what happens. So, even my wife will do that to me. When I can't seem to find something, she says, say exactly what you're trying to find into that voice thing. And lo and behold, so there it is. So.
All right. Great job, guys. We'll be back.
Mike, for one minute, I know Kevin's got to go at 11, but for 1 minute, I'm going to answer the question about Tim Tebow. That's Urban Meyer doing him a favor. He's not an NFL tight end, never will be an NFL tight end. He's an old guy that's trying to get back into football. He's not going to make it.
And for all three of us who have been at NHL drafts and we've complained about the sort of the lack of pace of the NHL draft and how it's 10 or 15 minutes. I mean, it's gotten better over the years, but nothing is more dreadful than sitting in a bar watching the NFL draft and this 15-minute lead up, and just also these guys can walk down an aisle wearing the worst tuxedos I've ever seen in my life.
Some guys weren't even wearing socks. Like, to me,
they were capri pants, whatever.
Oh, God. Oh, no, Mike, don't go down that aisle or I'll be talking about you the way I did Russ, the only man I've ever heard criticize another man's pants. Did you ever do that? I tell that people to everyone. I said, have you ever in your life heard any man criticize another man's pants? And they go, no. I said, I got one. And he was an NHL player. And I'm going to go down that path with you. I'm going to go down that path with you, Mike. You started talking about their pants.
For Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Lagello. Thanks for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. And capri pants were really terrible.